guests. My name is Sandy Smink, Executive Director of the ILC Foundation. We're delighted to be here with you today. Let me explain for a moment who ILC is, what it is we do, the gaps we are focused on addressing, and why we think that it's relevant to you as members of healthcare. The ILC were incorporated on March 23rd, 2011. We achieved charitable status on February 10th, 2012. And we received our first funding through the Ontario Trillium Foundation on March 8th. The chair of our medical advisory board is Dr. Norm Buckley from McMaster Children's Hospital. He is joined by Dr. Alan Finley from IWK, Dr. Christine Lamontang of CHIO, Christina Martinick, family practitioner in Oakville, Christina Pridmore, kinesiologist, CAPA member Mercedes Rodriguez, who will speak following my opening, and Dr. Stéphane Trevaux, a psychiatrist in private practice, Dr. Anna Banerjee, who is the recipient of the Order of Ontario, Dr. Callan Cowan, a naturopathic physician. Our board of directors includes retired CEO John Stevenson, lawyer Clint Calder, Peter Reinhardt of Saving Main Street, and Dr. Bruce Dick from the University of Alberta, Janet Switchenberger, and Rebecca Mills, who is a parent who has a child that suffers tremendously with chronic pain disease. In the process of due diligence to determine if pain in children is a worthwhile cause, we learned about the systemic challenges that face all people that suffer with pain. We learned that while there are peer support networks that exist for the adult population, very few programs exist for this at-risk population. We learned that not only is children in pain an issue within healthcare, it is an enormous issue that will have a lasting impact on society if it's left unaddressed. Although Canada's healthcare system supports collaborations through information exchange networks that includes important relationships with organizations like CAPA, families with children in chronic pain don't have a peer support network. Parents don't have one-on-one support to help them navigate the healthcare system. They don't have access to a 21-day program for chronic pain rehabilitation, like the Bath and Mayo models. They don't have, or rarely have, access to a medical roundtable that can proactively diagnose and establish a treatment plan. Instead, they are seeing up to 30 specialist appointments a month without cohesive diagnosis and treatment plans. As you know, the healthcare model, not the healthcare providers, is the root cause of these gaps. By legislative reform, including Health Reform 2014, some of these gaps may be addressed. Today, the ILC present a model that we ask you to participate in and support as a pilot, as a point of reference for patient care and healthcare reform. Dr. Peter Fitzgerald, president of McMaster Children's Hospital, has already committed to the pilot of the ILC-vetted 21-day pediatric chronic pain rehabilitation program. This is not to say that 14 pediatric healthcare centers need to adopt a 21-day program. The beginning request is to start with 4 regional centers, one East Coast, one West Coast, one Quebec, and of course in Ontario with McMaster at the lead. The goal is to see this happen in the following timelines. The ILC peer-to-peer support network, which supports families with children suffering from chronic pain, is funded for its first year, is developed and is underway with approximately 100 families to date. Part of the peer-to-peer support network includes medical professional to medical professional education and knowledge transfer. One-on-one support is partially funded for the first year and is provided by individuals that have lived experiences of navigating the system and can provide a listening ear to coach in a thoughtful way forward. For families living with chronic pain, offering a well-coordinated plan of care in this way will have a huge impact. A picture says 1,000 words. Today, in the life of children like ILC's Ambassador of Hope, Brooklyn Mills, who over a 10-year period was misdiagnosed with an eating disorder, somatoform disorder, conversion disorder, mental instability, and chronic regional pain syndrome, with countless doctor's visits, 8- and 9-week hospital stays, including 4 weeks in ICU, with little to no outcome. Countless medications, a feeding tube, an ill-placed PICC line. Brooklyn and the 5% of Canadian children that suffer with recurrent and chronic pain are at ground zero in terms of the health care they receive in their respective hometowns and in the big cities. Rather than use my own words to explain the patient's experience, let's watch a 6-minute video where they can tell you their story.
I've been living with chronic pain for about 2 years now.
I have been dealing with a chronic pain disease for 12 years.
You get sick all the time, you can't really go out, you're tired all the time.
It's the hardest thing to watch your child suffer with pain, and chronic pain is exactly that. It's chronic, it doesn't go away. They live day in and day out with pain.
When your child suffers, it's really, really challenging. And if you can't give them any explanation, it just becomes that much harder.
Watching your child deal with pain, like my daughter, it gives me incredible inspiration because she is so very brave and stoic, and I don't know, being an adult, if I could handle the things that she's handled.
As a parent, it is your worst nightmare. There's nothing that you would want more than to take your child's pain away.
Dealing with chronic pain has been a huge struggle for the last few years, and I've lost most of my teenage years.
I've also had to give up soccer because of chronic pain, and cheerleading.
Having to give up a lot of things. I've had to give up cheerleading. I've had to give up any physical activity, pretty much.
And it hurts mostly my back and my legs and my arms.
Having chronic pain has affected my relationship with my friends a great deal because I lost most of my friends because I wasn't able to do things that normal kids used to do. And you really find out who your real friends are because a lot of people won't be there when you're like this.
At the beginning, you know, a lot of people are by your side. Your family is by your side, your friends are by your side. But as it continues and as the longer it goes, friends start dropping out of your life very quickly. They don't understand. They don't want to try to understand.
It's harder right now trying to find people to talk to because some people are very negative and I don't want to focus on the negative thoughts. I want to try to be positive.
A lot of people, they understand what you're going through, but they really don't know.
Especially in the beginning, you feel very alone.
It makes you be able to open up and understand that someone's there to help your life be a little bit easier.
To be able to find someone that is dealing with the same thing and dealing with something similar to you, and for them to make you feel not alone anymore.
It makes me feel a whole lot better because I have people I can talk to.
It would be huge, huge impact in a positive way for me to have a peer support network.
To feel support from others, people who are in a similar situation, to lend support to others.
Because sometimes you feel like you're very much alone.
Being left out of a lot of things, you lose a lot of your childhood.
Every time I've been to the hospital, I just get sent home to deal with the pain on my own. People not believing me or thinking it's all in my head, and doctors saying it's so rare when it really isn't.
Is when the doctors don't even understand what I'm talking about. Like, they're a doctor. Aren't they supposed to know?
You know, when we bring her in, they say, oh, it's all in her head, don't know what's wrong with her, just send her home, just, you know, it'll relax, everything else will be fine, she's just a normal kid.
Doctors need to see that there is something beyond their exact scope of practice.
The doctor's not believing us. The doctor's telling her it's in her head.
Get doctors to recognize that these diseases exist, and as rare as they might seem, they do exist, and it's not all in their heads. They are suffering.
How has the ILC Foundation helped me and my family? It has shown me a huge perspective on how many people are actually dealing with chronic pain and chronic pain diseases, especially children. It's been able to give us a guidance of where to go, because when we got back, you are given this diagnosis and you are given this life situation, but you don't know what to do with it. You don't know where to go next.
The 21-day pain management program.
Implement programs like the 21-day pain program, which can help children with chronic pain learn to live fulfilling lives.
I have that hope that this program is going to change my life and change the way I see pain. Will do wonders for me, and I know will do wonders for many people that come into this program.
To get the word spread in Canada about these different diseases.
Improving the lives of children. And that's all we're striving for as parents, right? We want to improve the life of our child.
You find people who care about you, and you find the true people who will help you through anything, through rough, through happy, and that makes a huge difference, and it makes night and day. It really opens your eyes to the most amazing people in this world.
I help a lot of children that have been alone for a long time and would have remained alone and suffered on their own, and help them realize that they're not alone.
Don't give up hope. You gotta have hope.
Today, CAPA member and ILC Medical Board of Advisors Mercedes Rodriguez will speak about stats, facts, and the importance of validating pain. And Christy, who you all know, also a CAPA member, will discuss why peer support is so critically important. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Sandy, and thank you, CAPA, for having me here. So now that we know the emotional part of chronic pain in children, we have to go back to the very basic, and the basic question is, what do we call chronic pain? Because chronic pain has been traditionally described as that pain that lasts for over 3 months with adequate treatment, or over 6 months with no treatment, or between 3 to 6 months. Every time you look at a different definition, you will get a different number. The bottom line is that chronic pain is when pain is no longer a physiologic response that has a valid use for your body to prevent further damage, but it becomes an actual disease. So it is the transfer from symptom to disease. The ILC definition for chronic pain is the one that we see there, and it is an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage and lasts beyond the normal time of healing. It's also defined as chronic pain in children as a result of a dynamic integration of biological processes, psychological factors, and sociocultural contexts considered within the development of these kids. But why are we talking about chronic pain in children? Isn't this something that just happens in adults? And we know the statistics in Canada place chronic pain in adult population anywhere between 15 to 20%. So why are we talking about this in kids? So the best estimates say that Canadian kids, between 5 to 8% of them will suffer some form of chronic pain. In some research in Netherlands, it's as high as 25% of kids. And again, there is a challenge with the definition of chronic pain when you go back and see the studies that have been done on this subject. And for some reason, there tends to be a higher percentage of girls than boys with chronic pain. We're not sure why that's happening. Some cases might be just because boys need to be tougher and they cannot report that they're suffering pain and they cannot actually acknowledge that problem, but we are not sure. We also know that chronic pain in kids the frequency tends to increase with age, except for abdominal pain, which is usually more common in smaller children. And when we're talking about chronic pain, we're talking about simple things like headaches or MSK type of pain. going all the way to multiple sclerosis, Ehlers-Danlos disease, fibromyalgia. So why is a concern chronic pain in kids? Because chronic pain in children will change this kid's life. As you can hear from the video that we just watched, these kids will miss days at school, they're gonna withdraw from social activities. The parents are gonna stop working in some cases because they need to stay at home and take care of the kid, or they have to keep asking for days of work to keep meeting these specialist appointments that last for hours, and sometimes they have to travel long ways to get to where their care is. So why is sometimes this pain ignored? Like these kids were telling us in the video, people will say that they have it in their head, that it's not a real pain. It can start from a parental point of view because sometimes parents won't acknowledge that the kid is in pain. It's kind of a primal need to provide good care of your children, and you cannot support the reality that they are living in chronic pain. But beyond that, also parents kind of accept that we as medical professionals provide all the care that we can. And that study that is written down there, Enhanced Neonatal Surgery Studies, I don't know if you're familiar with it, it was done in the late 80s. And it talks about how, and hopefully this perception has now changed, but how surgeries in neonates and fetus will carry out without any kind of anesthetic because of the belief that they could not feel the pain. And we now know that that is not true. And now, as a primary care provider, I strive, even though it might look silly, to not even cause pain with vaccination. And I go out of my way to make sure that the kids do not get traumatized, but something that is supposed to cause, that is a preventative measure that is needed, but we don't have to cause pain with it. And it just takes 5 more seconds of your time to make sure that's the way it's done. Now, from the other side, why might kids not tell us that they are in pain? Well, because if they say they're in pain, it means that they're going to get a needle, they're going to have to go to the doctor. Big boys don't cry, so boys have an even bigger barrier to be able to say freely whether they're in pain. I don't want to worry my parents, or they might be really scared because something must be clearly very wrong with them to be living in pain. So what can we do as healthcare providers? So first of all, we need to validate the pain. We cannot say ever that the pain is in your head and nothing is wrong with you. Not until you know that that is the right answer. And that takes a long time because there is a lot of investigations to be done before you can assume this is just in the head of the kid. You need to provide reassurance. For parents and children living with chronic pain, it's a life sentence that you're giving them. I recently had a 13-year-old girl coming into my office saying, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia at one of the big hospitals, and they said, you are going to have chronic pain and you're going to have to deal with it. So this is a 13-year-old girl that was told that for the rest of her life she needs to deal with chronic pain. And they gave her some meds, they don't know how they act, so that was my role to explain how they're going to work. But they pretty much leave them in the limbo. And then further away, when these kids turn into adults, so once they turn 18 years of age, I have another patient who was diagnosed with MS a couple of years ago. She just turned 18. So while she was at one of the big hospitals for children, being taken care of by the MS clinic, so she was followed very, very closely. It's almost like being in a family, but now she turned 18. So now she's transferring to the adult MS clinic, which sees you once a year or less, and then again she's left in the limbo. So as primary care providers, we need to help these patients, and I've heard many times before that PA also stands for patient advocate, and well, this is our role. We need to help them navigate the system. And if the care they are not receiving is not the right one, then we need to find a better one. Now I'm gonna leave this to Christy, and she's gonna tell us her experience with chronic pain.
Good morning, everyone. Before I begin, I just want to thank Sandy from the ILC Foundation, as well as CAPA, for giving me this opportunity to speak to you here today. So I have been living with multiple sclerosis for the past 9 years. I was 18 and in first year of university at Guelph when I experienced my first MS attack of optic neuritis. An MRI a few months later confirmed the diagnosis. I felt broken. I was so afraid to even move. And the second thought I had was that I felt so sorry for my parents, that their daughter would forever be sick. So what did this mean? I immediately began to look for answers, not necessarily about what I could expect with regards to symptoms, but how was I going to deal with the emotions of these symptoms? How was my life going to change? And I was frustrated because I was 18 at the time and there was not a lot of literature or support materials for people my age. The things that I had been given to read were for people who were, had their careers established and had young families, things that I was nowhere near accomplishing. But fortunately, I have a very strong, supportive, loving family. My parents are amazing, and my friends have been very compassionate. And this would be helpful when learning to deal with the pain that is associated with the disease. So I experienced what they call the MS hug, and it's a sincere, it's a very hard tightening around my waist. And I can assure you it does not feel like a hug. I don't know why they called it that. I also experienced neuropathic pain, which I feel as a burning sensation, sometimes in my legs, but mostly in my feet. So what are the effects that this has had on my life? And I'm assuming all children suffering from chronic pain. As Mercedes mentioned, you withdraw from social activities at time, and it affects your work, your daily work, your productivity. And you also have difficulty sleeping, not necessarily because of the pain, but because the pain is a reminder that something is wrong. And so you lie awake wondering, how is this going to affect my life? But I'm a pretty stubborn person at times, and I'm very determined. So at the age of 23, I decided to assert my independence, and I relocated to Ottawa after having lived in Guelph and then at home with my parents for a couple of years in Kirkland Lake. So with the move, it only made sense to start seeing a new neurologist, somebody locally. And my first impression was not the greatest, because he sat with me, and he looked at my MRI scans, and he looked at me, and he looked at my MRI scans, and he said, well, you look good, you should be doing worse. And I thought, okay. And he said, you have a lot of disease activity on your spine. And I was kind of appalled because not once had my old neurologist ever showed me my MRI scans and where the disease activity actually was. So it made it very real for me. So I left the appointment feeling very deflated. And I thought to myself, okay, well, I'm a small town girl that maybe I just need to toughen up and get on with it. And furthermore, I trusted my original doctor. But a year later, the MS hug, as it was referred to, took hold, and I needed to go back to see the doctor because I needed help coping with the pain. He put me on a medication, and it did nothing to relieve my pain, and in fact, it made me very drowsy, so much to the point I had difficulty functioning in my daily life. So after a month, after giving it a shot, I went back to him and I asked if he could put me on anything else. And he just looked at me and he said, this is your disease. You have to deal with it. And I was really appalled that he would say something like that to me because I had been dealing with it for 5 years at this point. So through the course of my disease, to make a long story short, I've learned the importance of quality care. And I've recently made it my decision to go back and see my original neurologist in Guelph. So I drive the 6 hours to see him because he listens to me and he works to manage my symptoms and my pain. What I believe that patients need is for healthcare professionals to not talk down to us or treat us like a statistic for that matter. Because I think if you're told something bad is going to happen, then something bad will happen. You will make it a self-fulfilling prophecy. Furthermore, I think the power of hope is a very powerful thing. Now, I'm not saying that you should lie or even sugarcoat things to your patient, because I do think the truth is important. But as a healthcare professional, I believe that it is your responsibility to give the patient hope that they can have some semblance of a normal life. As I mentioned, I believe hope is a powerful thing, and I think it can affect a person's outlook on life, their overall well-being, and in turn, the course of their disease. I believe that when anybody is diagnosed with a chronic condition, that there's a period of mourning that you go through that I'm not sure will ever really end. But I'll never forget what my neurologist said to me on my very first appointment after being diagnosed. He looked at me and he said, "This is not a death sentence." And you know what? He couldn't have been more right. Because since I've been diagnosed, I've finished my undergraduate degree, I've traveled to Italy by myself, I relocated to Ottawa, I've started a fabulous life, I have amazing friends there, and I think I have a promising career. So on behalf of all children, teenagers, young adults, and adults for that matter, living with chronic pain, I ask that you speak to us and not down to us. Listen to us and find out what symptoms are a priority to us. Maybe one thing is more important to deal with than another, and it might not occur to you. Finally, work with us to manage our symptoms, our pain, and our lives, because as mentioned, this is chronic, this is lifelong, and this is something we have to deal with, so we need that support. Thank you for listening to my story.
Thank you very much for sharing, Christy and Mercedes. In conclusion, there are things that get said to patients when they're in clinic, at doctor's appointments. It doesn't matter if it's East Coast, West Coast, where they are. These are the kinds of things that have been said to patients and their parents. And they're shocking. They're important to see because you represent frontline. So when you meet with somebody who has a chronic pain disease, do as Christy says and provide them the very much support that they need, validate, as Mercedes explained, validating their experience, and help them manage their chronic pain condition. So together, ILC with CAPA, we have an opportunity to help that vision become a reality. And I really thank you so much for inviting us to participate in your conference. And I hope that we do some great work together. Thank you.